Imagine moving into a house that looks perfect on the outside, beautifully furnished, peaceful and welcoming. But behind the walls, something strange is waiting.
Madam Grace, remember, continue enjoying world, power and affluence. You need to renew your sacrifice. And now is the time.
In the center of a busy town stood a large compound owned by Madam Grace, a woman everyone respected. Madam Grace is a very influential woman in the society and also a very dedicated member in the church. She was known as the richest landlady in the area. Her skin always glowed, her gold jewelry shone under the sun, and her clothes looked like those of a queen. Madam Grace owned several houses across the city, but one house always attracted attention. It is called Everly. It was a wide compound with tall walls painted white and a black gate that shone like metal polished with oil. People who entered the compound were always shocked by how beautiful the apartments looked. Each flat had brand new furniture, expensive curtains, clean tiled floors, and wide mirrors fixed on the wall of every bedroom. Tenants always wondered why a landlady would spend so much money furnishing rooms for strangers, but they were too happy with the comfort to ask too many questions. Couples who had little money to buy furniture always rushed to rent the flats because it already had everything they needed. Young wives often smiled in relief, telling their husbands that the house felt like a gift from heaven. But they did not know that the same beauty that made them happy was also a trap carefully set for them by Madam Grace. The mirrors in the bedrooms were large and shining, always reflecting light even when the bulbs were off. At night, when the tenants lay in bed sleeping, the mirrors seemed to glow softly as if a hidden lamp was burning inside them. Some tenants even said they saw shadows moving across the mirrors in the dark, but whenever they stood up to check, nothing was there. No one suspected her because in the daytime she was always kind, smiling and ready to help. If a tenant's child was sick, she sent money for drugs. If someone lost a job, she allowed them to stay without rent for months. But deep inside, Madam Grace was not a normal woman. She was a witch, and she belonged to a secret society where women like her used unborn babies to renew their wealth and power. Every time she stole a baby's life, her beauty became fresher, her jewelry multiplied, and her influence in society grew stronger. People believed she became rich from smart business, but the truth was that her wealth was soaked in blood. One early Tuesday morning, Rose, who was in flat 8, woke up so happy as she just tested positive after waiting 2 years after marriage to conceive. She broke the good news to her husband, David, and they couples were happy, thanking God for his miracle. Every day, Rose wake up happy, taking all necessary precautions to secure the baby until 9 months, but what she doesn't know was that Madam Grace has sighted her baby from her secret mirror and waiting for the perfect day to attack. As time moves on, Rose began to notice strange things in her apartment. When she told her husband, he dismissed it and said she was just tired from carrying the pregnancy. Life went on, and then she pushed aside her fears. Meanwhile that night, Madam Grace transformed into a big rat and walked through the big gold mirror in her bedroom and moved to the other world where their members were having a meeting. Queen Mother called out her name with a loud, scary voice.
Madam Grace, remember, continue enjoying world, power and affluence. You need to renew your sacrifice. And now is the time.
They members hummed while feeding on their sacrifices from a big bowl. One night, Rose and her husband, David, went to bed after praying softly. Around midnight, her body began to shake. She felt someone pressing on her stomach, but her eyes remained shut as though locked in a dream. Right there the mirror quivered, and with an inhuman stretch, Madam Grace stepped through. Her body was tall and shadowy, but her mouth was the most terrifying. It cracked open wider than humanly possible, rows of sharp teeth glinting. A foul stench filled the room as her tongue, long and slimy, slithered across the bed. It coiled around Rose's stomach like a snake. Rose moved faintly, but still trapped in a deep, unnatural sleep, while her husband snored beside her, unaware of the horror. With a sickening hiss, Madame Grace's tongue pierced through Rose's skin, sucking life from the unborn child. Rose's body arched slightly, but she did not wake. Within moments the baby was gone, consumed. Madame Grace licked her lips and whispered, "Delicious." Then she slipped back into the mirror, leaving Rose pale and weak. The next morning, Rose woke up screaming in pain, and her husband rushed her to the hospital. Hours later, the news spread that Rose had miscarried. The tenants gathered, pitying her and saying it was just one of those sad things that happen to women. Madame Grace visited pretending to cry with the family, but behind her dark glasses, her eyes shone with victory. She had eaten her first unborn child from the compound, and no one suspected her. Rose and David continued with their normal lives, believing God for another baby. Few months later, a newly married couple named Peter and Anna came to rent one of the apartments. They had searched for a place for months, and when they entered Madame Grace's compound, Anna immediately fell in love with it. The chairs were soft, the dining table was polished wood, and the bedroom had a giant mirror with a gold frame as it is in other flats. Anna clapped her hands in excitement, saying it was the most beautiful house she had ever seen. Peter was also impressed because the rent was surprisingly low compared to the luxury inside. They signed the papers the same day, and Madame Grace smiled as she welcomed them warmly. Anna was 2 months pregnant, and she believed this house would be the perfect place to raise her child. Madame Grace also smiled, but her smile carried a secret hunger. That night, as Peter and Anna arranged their clothes in the wardrobe, the mirror in their bedroom caught Anna's attention. She stood before it, staring at her reflection, and for a brief moment, she thought she saw another woman standing behind her inside the glass. The woman had the same face as Madame Grace. Anna blinked quickly, and the image vanished. She laughed nervously and assumed it must be her imagination. But the mirror was not just ordinary glass. It was a doorway, and Madame Grace was already watching them from the other side, waiting for the right time to strike. Life in the compound continued peacefully for the new tenants. Anna and Peter enjoyed the comfort of their apartment, and Anna spent most mornings sitting outside, chatting with the other wives. At night, however, Anna began to have unusual dreams. She saw shadows moving across her room, and sometimes she dreamed of a woman dressed in red standing near her bed. Each time she woke, her body felt cold and heavy, but she convinced herself it was only pregnancy stress. She never thought her dreams were warnings. Weeks passed, and Anna's pregnancy grew. She became more careful with her movements, eating well and resting when necessary. The compound was peaceful on the outside, but Anna sometimes felt as if invisible eyes were always watching her. At night, the dreams became stronger. She would see the woman in red standing closer each time, sometimes touching her stomach, sometimes whispering words she could not understand. She often woke up sweating, clutching her belly as though to shield her child. Peter tried to calm her, telling her not to allow bad dreams to trouble her heart, but deep inside Anna felt her baby was not safe. On Madame Grace's 60th birthday, she called all the tenants together in the compound. She told them she wanted to host a small party for everyone to enjoy with her. She provided food, drinks, and music. The tenants were excited and praised her generosity again. Anna ate carefully, but she noticed Madame Grace's eyes never left her stomach during the gathering. At one point, Madame Grace leaned close and whispered, "You are glowing, my dear. Your baby must be very strong." The word sounded like a compliment, but Anna shivered. That night after the party, as the compound went quiet, Anna lay in bed feeling restless. Around midnight, the mirror in her room flickered with a dim light. She turned her head and gasped softly. She thought she saw a hand press against the glass from the inside. She shut her eyes quickly and began to pray. At that same hour, Madame Grace was inside the mirror, her body painted in chalk, her eyes burning red. She tried to step into Anna's room, but something held her back. Anna's whispered prayers filled the air, making the mirror heavy and hard to pass through. Madame Grace hissed in anger and retreated, deciding to wait for another night. Anna, not knowing what had truly happened, fell asleep again, her hand resting protectively on her belly. By morning, she only remembered the flicker of light and the strange shadow of a hand. She said nothing to Peter, but she carried a silent fear in her heart. The other tenants remained happy, still blind to the truth. Only Anna could feel that something evil was moving quietly through the house, and it was getting closer to her every night. She began to observe Madame Grace more closely. During compound meetings, she noticed how the woman's smile never reached her eyes. Whenever the tenants laughed or joked, Madame Grace often stayed quiet, her gaze fixed on the pregnant women as though studying them. Later that night, she woke suddenly to see a faint red glow moving inside the mirror. She shook Peter awake, but when he looked, the glass showed nothing. He laughed and told her to stop worrying too much. But Anna was sure she had seen something. She started sleeping with a Bible under her pillow, hoping it would protect her child. Days passed and Anna could no longer live with the fear eating her every night. She decided to stay awake past midnight to see what really happened in her room. That night, she left the lamp burning dimly and pretended to sleep. The house was quiet, Peter snoring softly beside her. At exactly 2 a.m., the mirror began to shimmer faintly. Anna's heart pounded so loudly she feared it would wake her husband. Slowly, like smoke twisting into shape, a figure began to form inside the glass. It was Madame Grace. Her red wrapper flowed like fire, her eyes glowing like burning coal. Anna clutched the edge of the bed, frozen with fear, as Madame Grace's hand stretched from the mirror, reaching toward her stomach. Anna wanted to scream, but no sound came out of her mouth. She felt a heavy weight pressing down on her, pinning her to the bed. The hand inched closer, its long black nails shimmering in the dim light. Just as the fingers brushed her belly, Anna forced herself to whisper a prayer. "Jesus, save me," she muttered with all her strength. Suddenly, the mirror flickered, and Madame Grace's form shuddered violently before pulling back into the glass. The weight lifted from Anna's chest, and she gasped for air. Her body trembled uncontrollably, but she knew one thing: her suspicion was true. Madame Grace was not just an ordinary landlady. She was a witch who fed on unborn babies. The next morning, Anna tried to share what she saw with the other tenants, but they laughed nervously, saying she must have been dreaming. Even Peter warned her to stop talking like that before she caused trouble with Madame Grace. Anna felt isolated and helpless. Still, she could not unsee what she had seen. She began to watch Madame Grace even more carefully. She noticed the way Madame Grace touched her mirror keychain whenever she looked at pregnant women. She noticed how Madame Grace's eyes darkened whenever someone announced they were expecting. Anna now understood that she was in a race against time. Madame Grace wanted her baby, and if she didn't act soon, she might lose everything. Knowing she could not fight Madame Grace alone, she visited a small church nearby and confided in the pastor about everything she had seen. The pastor, an elderly man with piercing eyes, listened quietly before nodding. "You are not the first to speak of her," he said. "But most who do never live long enough to tell the tale." He prayed over Anna and gave her anointing oil, instructing her to place it on the mirror in her room that night. Fear gnawed at her, but Anna returned home determined. For the first time, she was ready to confront Madame Grace. That night, when the clock struck 2 a.m., the mirror shimmered again. Madame Grace emerged, her face twisted with hunger. But this time Anna was not paralyzed. She stood tall, clutching the bottle of oil, and shouted, "You will not have my child!" She splashed the oil across the mirror, and immediately, a scream tore through the room. Madame Grace's body convulsed violently as fire-like cracks spread across the glass. The mirror glowed red, and the witch shrieked, thrashing as if invisible chains were pulling her back. The entire house trembled, waking the tenants, who rushed into the hallway in confusion. The mirror shattered into pieces, scattering across the floor like broken stars. In the wreckage, Madame Grace's body lay crumpled, her face pale and her eyes wide with terror. The once powerful landlady was nothing more than a broken old woman, her secret finally exposed. The tenants gasped, realizing that all the strange disappearances had been true. Some wept, others cursed her name. Anna, though shaken, felt a wave of peace wash over her as she held her belly protectively. The evil had been defeated, but the memory of it would never leave the house. From that day on, the tenants learned to be careful of where they lived and whom they trusted, for evil often hides behind the mask of kindness. And the once lively Everleigh apartment was deserted within weeks. If this story resonates with you, don't let it end here. Subscribe, like, and share it. Thank you.